Hello folks, I have an oldie to show you here. Show you a watch today that's a bit of an oldie. It's a favourite from my collection, and it's a Seiko Kinetic SKA463. Now this watch has been my regular beater for many years. It actually has a steel bracelet, but we have it on a buffalo hide effect soft leather condor strap just now. Now, the only problem I ever found with this watch, which has been very reliable, is that straps were hard to come by because although it's advertised as a 20mm lug width, the lug width is in fact 21.3mm. But you can squeeze a 22mm strap on without too much trouble. And the bracelet it came with had solid links, although it had a pressed clasp and pressed end links. They weren't solid milled end links in at the head of the watch at all. Anyway, many years of reliable service. This watch here, according to its serial number, was manufactured in 2011, and I bought it in that year. And so I've had it now for about 12 years. It is like an automatic watch in that the Seiko automatic generating system that powers it relies on the hammer going round just like in a mechanical automatic watch. And when that hammer goes round, it turns that tiny little gear there. Turns that quite quickly, which basically spins a magnet, generates a current which charges the rechargeable cell, which Seiko called a capacitor. Now, Seiko, this was marketing really because they wanted to sell batteryless watches, and that's what they wanted to sell to people. And so they called somebody in their marketing department came up with the idea of calling the rechargeable cells capacitors, even though they aren't actually capacitors at all. Technically, it's just the same as a little rechargeable cell that you might get for your battery-operated remote controls and torches and things like that. The original cells were a bit unreliable, so they modified them and they replaced them. And this one has been giving me really good service now for 11 years. Only thing is, it only maintains a charge if I wear the watch all the time. It used to hold a charge for a long time. Now, it takes a few days to wind itself up to fully charged. And then when it reaches fully charged, if you put it away in a drawer, the charge runs down fairly rapidly over a few weeks. It's not like 40 hours power reserve or anything like that. I mean, it'll quite happily sit for a month, but it will go down pretty low, which it didn't used to. And this is because the power cell, which is under this little panel here, has become less efficient now over the years. Now, 11 years isn't too bad for a battery change in a watch, which effectively this is, and this is what I'm going to do now. So I'm not displeased about it. It's just one of those things. We don't expect anything to be a perpetual motion machine forever. I wouldn't need to change this cell if I didn't have quite a large watch collection, and this watch doesn't spend enough time in the rotation to keep it nice and topped up all the time. To let you see what I mean, it has this feature. See this button here at the 2 o'clock? This button is actually a power indicator. If you press it, the second hand goes round. Now, full charge would be 30 seconds worth of movement. So as you can see that this is already, in the 2 days I haven't been wearing it, it's already lost a bit of efficiency. As I say, if I was wearing this every day, this wouldn't be an issue and it would go on for several more years without me needing to change this cell, but I think it's overdue. So what I did was, I got myself a replacement power cell from AliExpress for the grand total of £12.64. It's actually £10 odd, but they add their usual customs fee or whatever they like to call it. This is the part number for this particular watch, which has a 5M62 movement inside it. That's actually the most common one that you find in the Seiko Kinetics, a 5M62. And when we open the back of the watch, you'll see that this is actually a much more substantial movement than a standard quartz one. It's mainly constructed of metal, not a lot of plastic parts, and that sort of thing inside here. So it's actually quite a tough, you feel as if you've actually got something for your money with this quartz watch. Anyway, that's the serial number. And as I said, the price was just over 12 quid. It took 11 days to come from China. So we're going to fit this cell to the watch. Now, although it looks just like a battery, it's not quite so straightforward to fit it, because if we look here, we'll see that there is some mechanical gubbins between us and the cell, not least of which is the weighted hammer, which will have to be taken out in order to access it. So without much further ado, we're going to try this together and we'll see if I mess it up or not. I have some watchmaking tools to help us in this job. I have this little thing to hold the watch in place while I'm working on it. There won't be any reason to take the strap off the watch. We'll manage to do the job without doing that. And I've got this case back removing tool to twist it off, and if that fails, I have one of these rubber ball frictiony things to twist it off. So we'll see how we get on with that. After that, all I need is a pair of tweezers and some little tiny little screwdrivers. So let's see what sort of mess I make of this one. That came off without too much trouble at all, and we can see in here the exposed movement. Now what we want to do is we want to access the power cell, which is here. Now in order to access this power cell, we're going to have to remove this, which is done by undoing this screw here in the middle. Now I was going to run the camera and show you taking the mechanism off. The little screwdriver failed me and I had to find a littler one, and there was a lot of swearing and bad language, but eventually, when I found the correct screwdriver, it came off very easily. I kept the parts here inside the case back so you can see what was underneath the hammer. When we took the hammer screw, which is this big one in the middle, the hammer itself lifted off, and underneath there's this large cog. And you can see the large cog has a shaped spindle in the middle, which fit over this here, the post. Lifting the cog off, we then had access, unimpeded access towards the two screws that hold down the cover over the cell, which I was able to unscrew, fortunately, with the same little screwdriver. Can't emphasize this enough. The slots on watch screws are really tiny, and it's not so much the width of the screwdriver that matters, it's how sharp it is in order to access the slot. Anyway, here we go. What we're going to do now is we're going to take off this cover so that we can access the cell, which I'm not going to call a capacitor because it isn't a bloody capacitor, except in the minds of the marketing people at Seiko. So here we are, that's the cover removed safely, and I'll put that along with the other parts for safekeeping, because the one thing you don't want to be doing is losing any screws. Now, I change the batteries in my watch all the time. This is the first time I've ever attempted this, so I'm having fun. I hope you are as well. Although it's not obvious fun all the way through. Now, underneath the cover, we can see this insulator, which is held down on these little pegs. So I will need to reuse this for the new cell, I think, unless it has its own fitted. Here we go. Made of cellophane, and that's it off undamaged. Now it's just a case of removing the cell. There we go, quite easy. Slots under there, we'll have to remember that one. Not pinned down at all, but held in as batteries usually are by tension. And these little levers. Come on, darling, up you come. That's it. And here we go, that's the cell removed. Just let you have another look at this. It's a much higher quality quartz movement than we normally see. The watch cost me about £170, but since that's 11 years ago, that's probably, you could probably add another £100 onto that for a watch of this sort of quality today. It's a discontinued model, this one. You might be able to find one on eBay or something like that. I cannot overemphasise it's been an absolutely wonderful watch. I think it's a good looking watch, and I think it's well worth doing this cell replacement to keep it going, hopefully for quite a few more years. I'll put it back onto the holder, and we'll open up the new cell. Okay, we have the new cell out of its packaging now, so I'm going to place it in the slot. Time for us now to refit the little connection I said we had to remember earlier. Get it a little closer to get a better eyeball on it. Underneath. That's it, position, just drop down just nicely. It's time now to replace the cellophane insulator, which goes on like so. Now the two little open parts go over these contacts here, and there's a little locator pin here for the top bit. So that's on the locator pin. Another locator pin there. That's those two pins in, and that's it properly in place. Now we have to put the cover back on. Now helpfully, the cover only goes on one way, because there is this screw hole here, yep, there, and that fits onto the same locator pin that the insulator did. Now you see the little locator pin there, and the little locator pin there. Just make sure it's on, because these things have to make contact with the appropriate parts inside, or the capacitor won't recharge. That's slotted in just as it should. Now it's a case of screwing it back down again with the tiniest little screws that one could possibly imagine. Now this screwdriver is slightly magnetised, which would be a terrible thing if I was working on a mechanical watch. But in the context of this quartz movement, it's just useful because I can pick the screw up with it. Ease it into the slot. It might take a little while to get it right. That's it sitting. And I will now attempt to tighten that screw. Yeah. That caught the thread quite nicely. so there were no issues. Okay, that's that one screwed down. Now repeating the exercise on the other side. And that is the battery cover back in place. Now, reverse of what we did when I was disassembling it is I have to take this cog and put it back on its post. And it also has to fit so that it meshes with this little tiny gear here. That is upside down, I think. Fit on the post, but didn't mesh with the gear. Ta-da! Yep, and the teeth on the gears are meshing together just nicely. Now, I'll have to take out the post screw and the case back, because the next thing to go back on is the hammer, which is also shaped to fit that squared off post. And that's that in position. Now we'll screw the hammer down using its own screw. And there we are. As we see, when the hammer goes round, it turns that little gear much more quickly, which spins a magnet inside the generator there, which powers the cell. Now it remains to put the case back on. Now, I mentioned that I bought this watch in 2011, and because it's never needed battery changes, the case has never been removed before. Now, it is a 100-metre waterproof watch, and I have worn it happily many times in swimming pools, in the sea, on beaches, all sorts. But it relies for its water resistance on this rubber seal. Yeah? And after 12 years of use, I think the seal could be doing with being replaced. And I'm going to attempt that as well, because I bought a pack of assorted gaskets, and I'm going to find the right one, replace it, and put a bit of silicone grease on it. Well, it's actually not silicone grease. Yeah, it's silicone grease, because rubber can be eroded away using on ordinary mineral oils, or even if you use lithium or whatever. So silicone grease, this stuff, is what you need to lubricate gaskets in watches so they don't deteriorate and decay. So let's see if I can get this off. I mean, it doesn't look too bad, but it's quite hard, not rubbery. Here we've got a new gasket fitted, but it's not been lubricated yet. Just taking the tiniest amount of it and just running it gently round. This will help the thread engage, as well as look after the gasket. A while longer. than it would if it was dry. I may invest these nice little lubrication pads that you just stick it on and twist it round and it lubricates. I may invest in one of those because make it a little bit easier and less messy than that's been. And we just need to get the case back on. And we need to make sure that the gasket doesn't catch when we're screwing back in the case back. So just to get it started, we do it by hand without using any tools, just to make sure that nothing is snaring. And I think something's snaring here because I'm not being able to turn it nice and gently. Tell you what, I'm going to get a little bit more of the lubrication and put it on the thread as well, the case back here. A little touch of it, which will just hopefully help things on their way. And that feels a lot better. Now bear in mind what we're doing here is we're tightening this thread on top of that rubber seal. So the rubber seal can distort under there, which wouldn't be a good thing. Wouldn't be a good thing at all. At all. Let's see if we can help it in. And then using my friction ball just to get a nice seal. And here we are. And using a case tightening tool just to make it fully locked on. And that's it, job done. New cell fitted, watch clearly running. It remains to be seen how the new cell will perform, but I'm sure it'll be better than the 12-year-old one that's just been removed. Well, 11-year-old one that's just been removed. So, until the next one, bye-bye.